Hello, everybody. I'm just checking if everybody can hear me. It's a thumbs up, a wave, a hello. All right. Am I
Hello.
audible enough for everybody?
Yeah.
Incredible. Just wanting to say apologies for a bit of a late start. Just some technical difficulties. You live in South Africa and load shedding and all the like. However, we are here and very pleased that you are able to join us for this evening's workshop. So thank you so much. I am here today with Tasneem. Tasneem, can you just turn on your camera, say hello to everybody, who is going to be co-facilitating this workshop today with me. So it's going to be very, very exciting. Um, yeah, so we are going to get started. For those who are new, we do have the Back to Basics Workshop bi-monthly, and they're followed by an ATA dialogue, and that normally happens a day or two after after the Back to Basics Workshop. So the dialogue is going to take place on Wednesday, same time, and we're going to be taking everything that we learn in today's conversation, and then we're going to be marrying it with some real sort of life experiences, some on the ground experience, maybe even a perspective from academia, but we will see. So please do keep a look out on our social media and there'll be more information shared there. Um, yeah, so I am going to just share this. Here we go. But can I also just get confirmation that the screen is visible? Just a thumbs up.
We can see it, Michelle. Go for it.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, so today's sort of Back to Basics workshop is going to be kind of exploring how we're going to save the planet and ourselves, but specifically looking at sustainable development as well as circular economies. And then toward the end, we're going to have this discussion where we actually try to answer these two questions. How are we going to save the planet and how are we going to save ourselves? And then just before we call it, we're going to speak about what happens from now, where to from here. So that is going to be today's workshop. And again, thank you so much for joining us. I did want to start with a disclaimer and to just say to everyone that, you know, what we're going to be doing in today's workshop is more like an introduction of these ideas and these concepts. They can literally be workshops on their own, and it could even be a curriculum on just sustainable development. So after this workshop, please do extensive research just to be a lot more informed. And yeah, so please do that. And I do see that so many people have been checking in the chat already, telling us their names and where they're from. So hello to everyone. And if you have a minute so to kind of check in the chat, you can tell us your name, or if you haven't checked in the chat, you can tell us your name, where you're joining from, a feeling word, and one thing that brought you joy this month. And I'll start. So my name is Mitchelle. I'm joining from Cape Town, and I am feeling a little bit tired, but not too tired. And one thing that's brought me joy this month is learning to propagate the plant I got a while ago and just making more plants out of that one. So that's a very, very exciting process. So if someone hasn't done it and you feel like you want to tell us what brought you joy, please do so in the chat. Yeah, and then just to set a little bit of context for today's workshop, giving a little bit more meat to the cabbage and a little bit more, yeah, I guess just context. So this conversation or this workshop rather comes after there's been so many discussions already just around what development should look like. I'm like in the middle of the climate crisis, and especially this discussion around what the developing world or the global south should be looking at development as. And this discussion comes in so many different forms. It comes in so many different sectors, and people have so many different ideas of what that is. So with this in mind, there have been so many people who have been developing solutions for sustainable futures. At the African Climate Alliance, one of our solutions is to actually encourage and support climate literacy in the form of these workshops, for instance, and some in-person workshops that we also have. But one thing that we do know is that the conversation about sustainability is inherently one about justice and resilience. So the conversation about sustainability speaks directly to these ideas of justice and resilience and what that looks like in a changing world, especially in the face of the climate crisis. And so in the whole workshop, we're going to be trying to unpack how we're going to save the planet and ourselves, and how these ideas of a sustainable future and circular economies and how that all kind of works into this new future that we are trying to create. In the past workshops, we looked at global movements and the climate justice movement, what that looks like, what that is. And today we want to investigate and understand how communities can work towards sustainably developed, we want to investigate and understand how communities can work towards sustainably developed futures and also how they can meaningfully participate in circular economy. And when we say communities, we're not just talking about, like a city somewhere. We're not just talking about a complex building somewhere as a community. We're talking about, like this is a community. Today we've got a community of 46 people present. This is a community. We've got communities across the globe. We've got communities where we exist, where we work, where we go to school, where we go to hang out. So all of those kinds of communities are what we're talking about when we speak about communities. So in today's workshop, we're going to be unpacking how we can all contribute to the fight for sustainable futures from an individual as well as a collective perspective. And how we're going to do this is by understanding these two concepts that we started out with at the very beginning. But before we start, before we officially start, it's always very important to do a little bit of housekeeping. So if you do have a question or if you'd like to contribute, please, raise your hand or put a star in the chat or put a or just, contribute in the chat as well. That's also very much allowed. And then please do practice the rule of two and allow two people to speak or contribute before you contribute again. I always like to do an example of this just so everyone kind of understands what that looks like. So I'm going to call on Gabriel as well as Tasneem and kind of help me with the rule of two. So I'm going to speak a little bit, and then I'm going to take in Gabriel. Gabriel, I'm taking you in. Or Tasneem, rather, I can take you in here.
Okay, not a problem. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And then you can take in someone else. Maybe let's try Panache.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Cool. So I've got his name and Panache. So we're going to try that again, right? So I'm going to speak a little bit. I'm going to take his name in, who's then going to take Panache in. So this is the rule of two.
Well, I don't know what we're supposed to do. Or we're just speaking in general. So this is the rule of two, or you contribute between again, and Panache is going to take us through.
So I'm the second person to speak after Tasneem. So after me, then Michelle can reiterate her point again.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for doing that. And so that is the rule of two. It's a great demonstration. And so we're just calling on you out of the blue. So that is the rule of two. You wait for two people to speak before you speak again. This is just so we can allow everyone an opportunity to participate. And then feel free to use your home language. We are hoping that we might have someone who speaks your home language in the room. Otherwise, the best we can do is use Google Translate. That's something that we're trying to improve on as well. Yeah, so again, just noting that we do use English as our primary language of communication in the space, but that doesn't mean that you cannot use your home language to sort of engage in the space as well. Wonderful. And so we're going to start, and then I will be tagging into Tasneem as well, because co-facilitators. Yeah, if you would like to learn a little bit more about Tasneem, check out our website, check out our social media. There's a little bit more information about her there. But yeah, just starting with this idea of sustainability and the global south, or sometimes known as the developing world. The developing world is, I mean, I have my own reservations about that, but we will be using global south to talk to regions such as Africa, such as areas in Asia, such as South America. So those are all regions that also form part of the global south. And sustainable development is this idea that has become more and more important over the years, simply because there is so much discourse and so much discussion around how we can make our ways of life, our economies, the way that our countries run, how we can make all of those a lot more sustainable. And this idea recognizes that economic growth, social development, and environmental protection are all interconnected, and that we need to take a holistic approach to ensure that we are not sacrificing one for the other. This simply meaning that we need to take an approach that looks at every single thing in a full system before we make a decision. Or if we're going to be making a decision, then that's something that we need to do. Simplifying it a little bit further, we have some examples, right? Like having access to reliable, affordable, as well as sustainable energy is essential for improving living standards, development, and economic growth. And if you look at the same concept of, say, sustainable development from a healthcare perspective, we find that energy, if you're looking at energy specifically, it's critical for delivering and improving healthcare services and life-saving interventions, specifically in the global south. And it extends to other things like access to education, food security, and other societal ills and challenges. This could even look like the challenges we currently have with infrastructure, and this comes in the form of buildings, this comes in the form of roads, this comes in the form of a lot of different things. And so when we define sustainable development, we look at it as this idea that aims to meet the needs of the present generation. So this could look like us, all of us, the needs of the present generation, without compromising or without making future generations suffer for the decisions that we make, right? And this is something that you've started to sort of hear and you've started to sort of engage with, especially in recent years, where with the rise of the climate movement, or the climate justice movement rather, you hear that current generations have been speaking to older generations about how they need to be making decisions that service us, and specifically about how some of their past decisions that were made are affecting us now, you know? And so this is this idea that when we look at development from a sustainable perspective, we're looking at how we need to, in some cases, only use things that are enough for us so that future generations can have enough. And so this idea of sustainable development just kind of continues in that way.
So for this section, we're going to be focusing on the circular economy part. And then just a brief discussion or introduction to it. Circular economy is an economic system that is designed to eliminate waste and promote the efficient use of resources. These two concepts are interconnected and can be used to create a more sustainable future for our planet. So these are things that communities have also started, putting in place, and also governments, for example, to make sure that whatever happens in the future, we are working towards the good and also the sustainability of everyone else coming after us. Michelle, you can go to the next slide. Okay, just a note. The conversation around sustainable futures and circular economies forms part of a broader conversation of justice, where a just society can only be born when we start dismantling the unjust systems and that continue to disadvantage the majority of people and subject them to harsh living conditions, or place the same people in situations where they are forced climate refugees. So basically saying here that this is just a small tap into what the just society actually is. There's a bigger picture coming to this, and I'm sure a lot of you would have delved into it a little bit more. But yeah, if there's any questions throughout this session, please just put them in the chats. We do have it up on, or I have it up on my side as well. Okay, so sustainable development in practice means that we need to find ways to promote economic growth and social development while also protecting the environment. I'm not too sure if there's anyone in the session at the minute that has already kind of worked in this department. I know that we do have some of the ambassadors in the session as well. But basically, the smallest things that we do can have the biggest impact, right? And we know that, sorry, I'm just checking the chats as well. We know that working together obviously makes the biggest impact. So by doing the small things as a group, we kind of put together the bigger picture. I hope that makes sense. So this can involve things like promoting renewable energy, reducing waste and pollution, and finding ways to make our economies more efficient and sustainable. A lot of the things that we can do isn't always just, sometimes you can't necessarily do it the way you want to, but just spreading the word and supporting these different organizations that are doing these things is also making a big impact as well. Yeah, so let me actually ask a question here. What do you think can assist us in promoting economic growth and social development? I do have the chat on the side over here, so if you do want to put that in the chats, I will then read that out to the group. I'll repeat it one more time. It is also in the chats. Okay, Viviana says planting trees. That's awesome. Reusing, yes, so recycling, reusing, reduce, recycle. We know that one very well. Is there anyone else?
Thank you so much. So the other way is for us to start using electric cars. I feel like if we're going to be using electric cars, that means that we're going to reduce on the fossil fuels, the production of fossil fuels, which is a very good thing, actually. I feel it's also going to work. Just unfortunate they're expensive. I do take note of the fact that they're expensive.
That's so true. And I definitely agree with you. There's been a lot of talk around electrical cars. And I know that the big question is always, if we are a country that has no electricity, how do we have cars that run on electricity? But that's another topic on its own. And I definitely agree. Thank you so much for sharing Natasha, there's another hand. Panache, do you want to go?
Yes. I was thinking making use of compost bins. And to add on to what the previous speaker had said about electric cars, I feel like also making more efficient public transport systems for those who have their reservations against electric cars. So, yes.
Thank you so much. I definitely agree with you. Are there anyone else before I hand over to Michelle again? Okay, I don't see anything as yet. So I'll go to the chat just before I head over to Michelle, or hand over to Michelle rather. So I see here there is banning of fossil fuels, promoting the use of renewable energies. A lot can be done, I guess. For example, we can look at the use of renewable energy, planting trees, etc. Yes, we have mentioned that one. And then also solar cars would solve that both way, because the cars becomes a battery for your house. That is a really cool one. Okay, thank you so much for sharing, guys, and please continue using the chats. That's why it's there. And we are trying to have a discussion with everyone in the room. So it's not just going to be us talking all the time. We want your input as well. So yeah, we have another one from Deboho that says becoming custodians for our endangered ecosystems. Thank you so much. And I see Michelle's popped back. So Michelle, you can take over.
Thank you. And thank you everyone again for just, saying your thoughts in the chat. And so it really, I think for me, this like starts to make a lot more sense, right? Like this idea of like sustainable development. For me personally, I'm a lot more inclined to this idea that we need to have proper infrastructure so that we can invest in things like proper public transport systems, like a train system or a train line that maybe runs through the whole of Africa, or like a bullet train or something like that, right? But for that to happen, we need to have sustainable development practices in our minds so that when we do develop these solutions that we've already been hearing, like there's an awesome solar car that can also be a battery for the house, which I think is incredible. And I think obviously this solves partly the energy issue that we have. It might also solve the fossil fuel issue that we have. I'd obviously need to reach out to ISAO and find out more about how that would work. And so, like, an important aspect of sustainable development is the idea of intergenerational equity, right? So when we start talking about these ideas of like equity or like intergenerational simply means myself in my 20s, maybe my parents, which are the generation before me, who might be in their 40s or even 50s, and some of our parents are maybe even in their 60s and maybe even 70s, right? That's the generation that comes before us. So if I start collaborating with the generation before me and that generation is interacting and collaborating with the generation before them, then that becomes intergenerational. I just wanted to explain a little bit more on the idea of intergenerational. And when we speak about equity, oftentimes it's linked to this idea of justice, right? And what that looks like. It simply means to offer and to provide what is needed from a case by case perspective, whereas someone would go, I want to see over the fence, and someone else is seeing over the fence, we would not all give them like, I don't know, a plank to stand on that equalizes, right? So equity is very different from equity in that where equality aims to equalize from wherever someone is, we just give them the same stuff. Equity looks at where people are in different aspects of their journey, their life journey, and then from that perspective, people are then offered or given what they need, or like systems are then created to make sure that those systems are equitable, which means they service everyone or the majority of people in ways that are needed. and not just from an equality perspective. And I hope I'm making a lot of sense on this. Which also means that we need to ensure we're not using up resources or causing damage, which will make it harder for future generations to meet their own needs. So instead, we need to be finding ways to meet our own needs. And this is that idea of intergenerational equity, right? We need to find our own needs while also preserving the resources and ecosystems that future generations will rely on. Hashtag remove the fence, exactly, in the chat. And so we swiftly move into this idea of a circular economy and in practice, right? We've heard a little bit about what a circular economy is, and now we want to look at the concept from a practice perspective. And in a circular economy, materials are kept in use for as long as possible and waste is minimized, which can involve things like designing products that are easily disassembled and recycled. I've recently started seeing this idea of furniture that can turn into other bits and parts of furniture, where a piece of furniture was previously a stool, it can fold out into like this awesome table, which could fold out into this awesome bed, which could fold out into this, awesome couch. And so this is just an example of like designing things that can not only be easily disassembled, but also recycled and even reused, right? And so this needs for those sort of design principles to also, in some cases, be closed loop systems where waste from one process is used as a resource from another. And we've started to see this a lot more with the rise of, it could be sustainable fashion, it could be, sustainable ways of farming, it could be really anything. And this is the one thing that I love about small scale circularity, right? It allows us to see what is actually possible on a larger scale in terms of these systems and these businesses, in some cases, that people are developing, so that when we do start moving a lot more faster to the circular economies, and when we start thinking more sustainably about our development practices, we have blueprints, we have somewhere to look, we have something that we can say, this is an example, and we've seen this being used in this way and that way, and we can scale it, or we can make it bigger, or we can make it service more people, right? And so the circular economy is based on three key principles, one being designing out waste and pollution. So in the design processes, something that then starts to make a lot more sense or a lot more intentional is putting, like in the design, because what we've seen with linear ways of design have been these designs that are made, and then like waste is made, and then after that it's like, okay, what then happens to this waste? And in a circular economy, it's more like, fine, we understand that in the creation of anything, oftentimes you can have waste that's created. But now how can we design, say, a garment already in our minds before it becomes a garment? How can we design it with keeping in mind that there will be waste, and then what are we going to be doing with that waste, and how are we going to be reducing pollution? The second is keeping products and materials in use. So like where we speak about closed loop systems, if you can sort of imagine like a circle or a donut, right? And your start point is anywhere on that donut, right? And we call that starting point A. And your ending point is maybe Z. And it's anywhere on this donut or on this circle. And whenever you create something at position A, the waste maybe goes to position B, and a new product, or what would be waste, or this material that we're looking at as new resource, right? Then create something else. But at the end of the first thing that we created at point A life, it can actually be used to create a new product at point C. So you see, this idea of keeping products and materials in use, it also lessens this idea that we already have, that waste is to be put out, is to be thrown out, is to be put at the wasteland. And it starts to tackle things like greenhouse gases being emitted at scale. And then lastly, regenerating natural systems. Because we're not so much reliant for this continuous supply of resources and material from our natural systems, we can actually keep that in a closed loop and take on things when need. Again, that idea of equity, we find that we can not only regenerate, but we can also start or continue to preserve our natural systems that are currently under attack or under destruction, um, simply because in a capitalist society, what you need to do is create an infinite amount of riches, and oftentimes not necessarily considering what then happens to the environment around. And so that's why you'd find that most times when circular economies are discussed, it's almost always in direct opposition of capitalist societies. And a lot of people who advocate for capitalism don't always subscribe to this idea of circular economies, because the idea of infinite economic growth or infinite riches acquired starts to fade. It starts to become a thing of the past. It starts to become something that we can imagine. And so this is just sort of like a little bit of an example of circular economies in practice. Tasneem, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. So in this section, we're going to talk about the sustainable development and circular economies examples. The first one is the city of Amsterdam has implemented a circular economy strategy that involves reducing waste, promoting sustainable design, and creating a closed loop systems for materials and resources. Now, Michelle has already touched on the closed loop systems in her previous discussion now. And you can also, if you picture it, think about the different ways that they are basically taking, or let me rather say, compared to South Africa, that it's very different in Amsterdam. If you look at all the videos or movies, you see that the streets are clean. There's not really much waste. There's not very much, or there's not a lot of cars. They use mostly bicycles, and it's usually on the side of the road. You'll see it very, very prominently. So yeah, that's one example. And then the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is a global organization that promotes the circular economy. They work with businesses, governments, and other organizations to develop and implement circular economy strategies. So this is just an example of, foundations that actually work to promote these smaller organizations or smaller parties to do the work of creating that sustainable future and circular economies for their countries specifically. Okay, Michelle, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, the cradle-to-cradle design philosophy is based on the idea of creating products that can be easily disassembled and recycled at the end of their life cycle. This approach has been adapted by companies like Nike, Puma, who are designing products made from recycled materials and can be easily recycled or repurposed. So even if you break that down and you take it away from the company itself, recreating what they've already put out there, a lot of people do that on their own. People buy certain things and they then change it up themselves. Or if you look at thrifting, for an example, that is another way of basically touching in with what this philosophy is speaking about. The city of San Francisco has implemented a zero waste program that involves reducing waste, increasing recycling and composting, and promoting sustainable design and consumption. Right, so we all know about the zero waste program, or what that entails, or trying to reduce waste and increasing recycling and composting. I know I've seen in the chats that a lot of people have mentioned a little bit about renewable energy, and also this kind of filters in with that. And also just, the small things, throwing papers away, using every single bit of your ingredients when you're cooking, and making sure that there's almost nothing left behind. Using what you think you should throw away for something else, because you can. There's a lot of things that you can do with that. And that's also just a lot of people are trying to implement that in their daily lives now as well. Michelle, you can go to the next slide.
Cool. I do see a hand. Do see Tanaka's hand is up, and I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand or that's a new hand.
No, I'm raising my hand.
Okay.
You can
I
go
wanted-
ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, isn't the zero waste program like rather expensive for a lot of people, and rather not as inclusive to the general public? Because I know that a lot of zero waste stores like to sell specific things that a lot of people would deem as unaffordable.
Ooh, can I answer? Because I'm very, very passionate about this idea of like the zero waste program, and only because my first or part of my introduction to this world of like sustainability and like climate justice was because I had tried to subscribe to the zero waste movement. So that question resonated deeply. Like when you asked it, I was like, I need to turn my camera on. And only because there was, just for those who might not necessarily have context, I'm going to give specific characteristics of this idea of the zero waste movement that was seen in like mainstream media, right? And because a lot of mainstream media informs our work or like our ways of seeing, or like we consume a lot of it, right? That's just fact. We're on Instagram and we're on Twitter, we're reading all these articles with all these great ideas of what zero waste is. And when I started out, it was, I feel so old. It was a couple of years ago, maybe 5 even, where the rise to people wanting to maintain 5 years of trash or rubbish into like a very small can like this. And it was almost always people who had an apartment somewhere that was maybe even bought by their parents. It was in the global north. It was these people who practically could afford to be part of the zero waste movement, just from a resources perspective. It's this person who could go, actually, I don't really like this, and so I'm going to substitute it with something else. It was someone who could always kind of decide or had access to a lot more decisions than the regular person. And so when I started, I was like, this is amazing. This is an incredible concept, and I love it theoretically speaking. And then in practice, I tried to get my whole family to like get onto it. And like we are 7, right? Like I come from a big family. And 7 is not the big, like this is the smaller side. I come from a really big family, and I'm gonna start with my immediate family, and I'm gonna get everybody to like cut out plastic, and we're gonna go zero waste. And within a week, I very quickly realized that the zero waste movement, mainstream zero waste movement, was for privileged rich people, and that it had nothing to do with me, and I could not take part. And so when we speak about zero waste in this movement specifically, I think what we need to start discussing is this idea of going back to sustainability, right? Like going back to the roots of sustainability and what it started. And we can even look at pre-colonial or the pre-colonial world, because what is now being deemed sustainability, or these new concepts of sustainability that are coming up, are things that have been long practiced by our ancestors and their ancestors uh, across the global south. This idea of literally taking care of a tree when it's younger because it will give you shade instead of uprooting it and putting a complex building there has been an idea that's been there from like the beginning of time. And so just from that very small, very passionate idea, I think the idea of zero waste from a mainstream perspective is very problematic because it is very exclusionary. Like it takes so many people out of the conversation across the global south, right? Across South Africa, across different countries, across class, because it's then made to seem like it is only for rich people, to be honest. So like only people who live by themselves, because it is a lot more doable, I guess, from that perspective. And it doesn't always work for everyone. So I do feel like when we do have the conversation around zero waste and what that means, zero waste living, um, it should be more like an inspiration. So you should be looking at this idea, the concept of zero waste. My math teacher when I was in high school used to say, infinity is not a point, but an idea, I think it was. And then it's something that you strive towards. So you go towards infinity and you never quite arrive because it isn't a point, it's a concept. And so that's kind of I feel how we need to be treating our zero waste. We need to reduce waste and we need to be mindful. And those things I guess then integrate into this idea of like sustainably living and then what that means for the developing world, what that means for the global south, what that means for a post-colonial world that is not only trying to connect with its roots, but also trying to discover how these practices can be integrated into like our modern societies and our modern world. Yeah. Tasneem, back to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And let me just say, I do agree with that completely. I think the biggest thing that I can remember in terms of trying to be zero waste is, I don't know if you remember the eco bricks that people try to make, and I think you touched on it a little bit, where people try to compress their waste into a small
Yes.
brick, and people started making things from it. So completely understand that was as far as I could get at the time. And that's also something we need to take into account. Like we're trying to create a sustainable future, but not everyone can do it. And you do it to the best of your means. And as long as you do that, that is all that, we ask for. And that's what we need to try and do. Okay, so I see some technical difficulties. I'm going to go to the chat quickly, and I saw some nice things that popped up. Evelisa said she's enjoying, sorry, I'm not going to put pronouns out there. They're enjoying the meeting. Indalani said archaeology and permaculture, planting and propagating more indigenous and endemic plants, removing all the invasive plants. That's good. And then Panache said again, in my opinion, zero waste shouldn't be about no plastic per se, but more to do with the managing of your plastic waste and finding ways in which you or your use of the plastic and be somewhat recycled in your home and community. And I definitely agree with you there. Aside from looking at it as a complete topic on its own, look at what you can do. And the smallest things that you can do makes the biggest difference. And I've said that earlier as well. Look at what you can do, and it will make a big difference from there. And then there's another one. My belief is that so-called waste is only a resource you haven't figured out how to use yet. That's a very interesting one. And to some extent, I do agree. So again, I don't know if this is the right statement, but I remember saying someone's waste is someone else's treasure, or it might be in a different context, if I'm not mistaken. But it definitely is something that you can link towards this one, because that's how you kind of reuse things, right? You look at what you would deem as waste, and you can try and figure out what to do with it next. And that is also sometimes how, the I guess less fortunate people need to think also these days, because you don't always have what you need. So you kind of think of creative ways of using what you do have to make a bigger difference, or to help you at the moment that you need it the most. So I definitely like that comment over there. Okay, the saying is along the lines, one person's trash is another person's treasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Awesome. Okay, so I think we can go to the next slide, Michelle. Okay, are there any questions that you have at this point in time? Are there any questions from you guys?
Also, just noting that this is kind of like an opportunity for us to go into a little bit of a discussion, just about like how we imagine this idea of sustainable development and circular economies, maybe even how practical it is. So is it something that's practical? Is it something that we can envision? I do know that majority of the people in the room are joining from Africa. What could this look like maybe even in your community? So this Q&A section is more of a discussion section.
Okay, you're welcome to put your hands up. Petrele, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoy being part of these sessions that you guys have, and just thank you for doing it and connecting us across Africa. Yeah, my question is a little bit of a cheeky one. Earlier in our chat, I shared a link for a blog. I'm happy to just share the link again. And my question is if people can maybe have a look at it and like and share the information there. It's something that one of my fellow lay leaders, so I am a lay leader for social justice at the Cape Town Unitarian community in South Africa. And one of the other lay leaders that's involved with social action as well. We collaborated on writing a blog on circular economy for Earth Day, which was on Saturday. So yeah, if people can have a look at it, maybe it helps, like and share, we'd really appreciate it, because we need to get this messaging out of out there. I love how we've commented on the fact that sometimes when we look at things like sustainable development, when we look at things like circular economies, when we look at things like zero waste, simple living, it always seems to come with this whole, colonialism and what's that other horrible word about making money? Capitalism. Sorry, I just wiped out that word from my vocabulary already. But yeah, just, in terms of just pushing for consumerism. And so oftentimes we out there in the streets and we're saying people before profit, let's not be so focused on profits. Let's be focused on people. And something my husband always reminds me of is, you know, as much as the rest of the world wants to make as if Africa doesn't have much to contribute, that what Africa does have is people. You know, that's one of our most important resources. And so we really need to mobilize our people and say, let us look at the answers that we have inside of us already, instead of thinking that we need to look to the outside for the answers. Let's get back to basics. I absolutely love that that was, you know, the theme of discussion today, because that's seems to be a theme that's coming up for me personally lately. So yeah, just very excited to be here. And thank you so much for the sharing that you are doing. And I promise, Tasneem, the more you do it, the less nervous you're going to be, you know? So just
Thank
keep
you
at
so
it.
much.
It sometimes comes just with practice.
Yes.
And that we do it together. You're not alone, you know? So yeah, thank you again for what you guys are doing. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing and also sharing the link. I think it's a very, very amazing piece that you just shared with us now. And also, thank you so much for the personal encouragement. I definitely needed that one. Maybe I'll just be a bit, I don't know what the right word is, but I'll just explain a little bit about what the nervousness was about. This is my first Back to Basics workshop. So thank you also for hosting me as much as I'm hosting you guys, or we are hosting you guys. I feel like you guys are also kind of hosting me in a little way. So yeah, I definitely look forward to having you guys back in the next one. I'll definitely not be as nervous as I am right now, but I also feel a little more comfortable now. So thank you so much for all of the comments. Panashe, thank you so much. And then Natasha also sent a comment in the chat. And I'll just read this one quickly. It says, I've always wondered whether sustainable development would be achieved more readily by incorporating more Indigenous knowledge. Like, what does sustainable development look like? Is it science-driven or Indigenous knowledge, or a mixture of both? Okay. And I see that there are some comments on that as well, and that's amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, I just also want to touch on what, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Celia was saying is that South Africa is definitely people heavy and also community heavy. And I think that's what makes South Africa such an amazing city or country to live in, sorry. So yes, we should definitely work with the strengths, and people is what we should make our focus. So there you'll also see that Michelle has said that we will share them after the workshop, and I think she's referring to the slides. So if you have any other questions, you are welcome to pose them in the chat now, or even raise your hand if you want to speak to the crowd. But the slides will definitely be shared after the workshop. Okay, Michelle, do you want to come in, ask any questions?
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure if you touched on Lucas's contribution there. Just responding to Natasha's comment. And Lucas says sustainable development can be achieved through a mixture of both Indigenous knowledge and science-driven approaches. The integration of Indigenous knowledge can provide more nuanced and culturally appropriate approach to sustainable development, while science can help to validate and test the effectiveness of these approaches. And I think that's also just, I guess, interesting to also hear, because I do feel like there is a science, like Indigenous knowledge, there's like a science of Indigenous knowledge. So it doesn't always have to be the Western methodologies of science that are valid and validated. They are very much like very local methods of testing ideas and methods that might not necessarily be acceptable in Western ways, but would still, maybe, in my opinion, would still account as, I guess, an indigenous science, if I can put it that way, because I do realize that we have to qualify it. And so, yeah, I think that was really great. We do have about 20 minutes to go. And I think for the next bit, and again, thank you so much to everybody for being just very engaged and participating. For the next bit of the session, we're all going to be collectively answering how we can then save the planet, right? Now we've learned a little bit about this idea of sustainable development and circular economies. But now, how can we actually use these ideas to save the planet? And I'm going to invite everyone to raise hands. I have a nasty habit of picking on people. So if I do pick on you, please do forgive me. But it really is more about one, hearing your voice and hearing your thoughts, because I do realize that we all have something very meaningful to share. So how can we save the planet? And that's the first kind of question that we can all collectively try to answer. And this can even be, I think, to also qualify it a little bit further, this can be a thing of how can you save or how can you preserve the environment in your community or in the spaces where you exist. So that sort of question. And I am going to start picking on people. So please forgive me for doing that. I'm going to pick on Paul Dere first. Paul, how do you think we can save the planet, our immediate environment? And yeah.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone we are okay there. Are you able to get me? Maybe I'm too.
Yes, we can hear you. If you can just maybe speak a little bit louder, Paul.
Okay, I'll just say the one way we can how we can save our planet in our area. The first one I'll say is to reduce maybe and recycle, cut down on what you are thrown away. Again, it is to use long-lasting light bulbs. Okay, for us in order to maybe to save our planet. Also, maybe to move around to teach our friends what is the importance of our planet. I'm sure that's my thought on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution. I think a lot of things also come from where we build collective knowledge. We have more people who know these things. So I really, really like your contribution there. Mary Tusanga. Mary, can I take you in here?
So the way how we can save our planet, and we can also avoid the disposal of plastic materials. And we can also use cotton bags to avoid making plastics, a lot of plastics. And we can other policies which supports Mother Nature. And the other thing we can do, we can keep the just transition, yeah, by planting a lot of trees.
Thank you for that. I think definitely about reimagining how we create things and how, yeah, we start moving toward a just transition. And I think it's so helpful for us to also be speaking about sustainable development as well as circular economies, because those are often also themes and central ideas when the conversation around the just transition is also being had. Mugisha Isaac, I see your hand.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for this great opportunity that you've created for a cause that is so vivid, saving the climate and saving the world, saving the earth, saving everything. And for me, personally, I believe in renewable energy as a way to save this Mother Nature Earth. For example, in Uganda, where I come from, and I think it is done in so many countries, whereby generating electricity from maybe the dam, for example, hydroelectric power, to your home takes a whole, like, a number of trees, a very huge number of trees. So if we are to use renewable energy like solar systems, we'll be saving our planet a lot and a lot. So what I do, like most, like my campaign and my part of my business is advocating for use of renewable energy, in this case, which is solar systems, to save the planet, and you stay on, like no load shedding and all that. So thanks for this opportunity, and let's hear from the rest.
Thank you for that. I also see that the chat is alive and well. And so we're just going to go through these hands, and then we're going to go into the chat and then just kind of read out those contributions, which are wonderful. Viviana, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Viviana from Kenya. So I think one of the ways we can save the environment is like by teaching people ways of disposing waste. Like right now, I am on a project where we teach people on the dangers of disposing waste in rivers. We are interacting with people where we clean the rivers and teaching them like why is it harmful to dispose waste on rivers, and yeah, that's it.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Semi, I see you. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Again, my name is Sami Kinzeku. I'm from Kenya, Nairobi. First, I would like, for example, in Africa, we should all embrace the fact that we can ban all plastic bags, like what Kenya did.
Sorry, Sunny, can I ask
yes?
you to just speak up a little bit, please? Just a little bit louder.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. Okay, I was just saying, like, we have noble ways, banning plastic bags, like what Kenya did. We managed to ban plastic bags, whereby we stopped a lot of plastic pollution. And currently, with my organization, which is called Greener Cities, we have projects in tree planting, mostly in urban centers, whereby there's a lot of forestation. So those who are from cities, because of infrastructural development, we are requesting our city engineers or architects, when they're planning in buildings, they can come up with eco-friendly buildings whereby they can accommodate trees. And by doing that, we also encourage people not only to plant trees, but also nurture them. And as my colleague Vivian said, we're also trying to do cleanups, especially along Nairobi rivers and Ngong rivers, which are very dirty. So we are encouraging and advocating for less pollution, because in Kenya there's a lot of pollution. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And then I did see Blessed, your hand you put in the chat. So please do go ahead and unmute.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we can save the planet by trying to educate people about the dangers of climate change. Then we can also try to volunteer. Then people will be doing cleanup campaigns so that we may reduce litter on the environment. Then we can also save our planet by reducing deforestation. Then we can also save the planet by trying to ban burning of fossil fuels so that greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution, and thank you to everyone who's contributed. I'm getting a little bit nervous now because I'm noting time, but I see so many meaningful contributions in the chat as well, and I'm just gonna run through them as well because they're just very, very important. I'm gonna start by first one, which says it may seem insurmountable sometimes. It may seem too big sometimes, but saving the planet starts with me, and it might sound cliche, but to be the change you want to see in the world. Greatest challenge. My greatest challenge has been that I don't have a stable place to stay. So I've really embraced the idea of guerrilla gardening. I love the idea of guerrilla gardening. Paul says to also educate our people within our society. And I think this is a theme that is constantly coming up. We've heard it in so many contributions already, just from the people who are speaking, talking about this need to educate our peers, our society, our community. Lucas says planting trees which can help mitigate climate change 100%. Nadia says, I think to ensure that future development does not fall into the fallacy of promoting a greener capitalism. I'll just try to rephrase that as well, just in the true spirit of back to basics. Nadia says, I think to ensure that future development does not fall into the lie of promoting a greener capitalism. Pressure for higher standards in terms of transparent supply chains, labor practices, and ownership models needs to be applied, and also be more visible to the consumer. We need to be able to boycott brands that continue to invest in extraction and destruction, producers and banks alike. For example, if I could ensure my pension holds no shares and such, I would totally choose it and pressure my employer and chosen financial provider to do so. 100%. I do not want to add to that because I feel like I will take away. Lucas says we can save our planet also by investing in education to create awareness on the importance of sustainability and what we can do to protect our planet for future generations. Lucas also says we can save the planet by reducing the amount of waste we produce by buying fewer products, reusing items as much as possible, and recycling what we can. Brian says, yes, and also adapting to renewable sources that are zero, that cause zero harm to the environment. And then Spongile says climate literacy is one way. We can educate people in ways to save our planet. Also recycling and reusing play a huge role. And then Lindelani says we can save our planet by educating young minds about the importance of having a good planet and visiting old people and doing research about the indigenous knowledge of saving the planet. Also, we need to unlearn unnecessary things and learn really useful things. And then again, advocate for policies that support a sustainable future, like carbon pricing and renewable energy incentives. That's Lucas again. Paul says we can also volunteer ourselves by cleaning up our communities and our homes. Margaret says we can save the planet by recycling waste such as plastic. Brian says also we can help our planet by creating awareness to people so that we teach them the effects of these resources that are harming our planet. And then Ayanda says, get active, not anxious about the future of our planet. Margaret says we can also save the planet by keeping our environment clean and green. Rhoda says we can also volunteer for clean up. We can also volunteer for cleaning up the community, reducing and reusing, and cutting down on what we throw away, and also use the use of long-lasting light bulbs. Becky says we can keep our environment by growing trees, cleaning up, using the use of recycling, reusing, and many others. Using energy efficient appliances, reducing air travel, switching to electric vehicles, and planting trees to offset carbon emissions, and conserving water, like fixing leaky faucets. That's Anna. Blessed says trying to use bikes rather than driving so that we reduce emissions, and also to place a strict law and fine those who violate the law. And then Penny says to volunteer for cleanups in your community, using environmental clubs in schools and universities for purposes of educating the community, cleaning waste, planting trees, and enforcing, reducing, reusing, and recycling. Last but not least, Tawanda says, by practicing afforestation and stopping deforestation can help the planet. Amazing contributions, everyone. The next question would have been, so how can we save ourselves? And I think we've done an extensive job at really touching on how we can save the planet as well as ourselves. So I'm not really going to go into this in the interest of time. But we hear a little bit more from the chat. Sammy saying taking less meat products, and Tele saying drinking more water as ways we can save ourselves. The real question becomes, what do we do from here? We've heard extensively about all the things that need to happen. But I think the bigger question then starts to be, what happens from here? Like, where do we go? What does the roadmap look like? And maybe Tasneem, I will take you in here. Maybe just to guide us through this and like speak to us about where you, so what would the call to action be? What would a person leaving this workshop go out and do?
Okay, so like Michelle has said, now we need to look at what, or rather where to from here. What are we going to do, or what would someone having been in this discussion need to do going from here, from this session? I'm going to pose the question to you guys because this is part of our discussion section. What do you think, aside from the things that we've already mentioned, what is the next steps? What do we do from here? How would we take what we've learned in the session going forward? Okay, we said exercise regularly and create awareness. Thank you so much for that comment. Okay, where do we go from here? What is the next steps that we need to do from this session to create a more sustainable future? Blessed said that we need to take action and engage with our communities. That's brilliant. And Sela said, to the next meeting on Wednesday to implement our ideas. Wonderful. That just tells me that there are going to be some of you in our session on Wednesday as well, which is exciting. Okay, and then I'm going to also touch on what Blessed said, to take action, right? What are we wanting to do? That is what we're also trying to figure out in this question in terms of where to from here. What is that action that you would need to take? What does it look like? Sammy says more research on creative ways, on ways we can save our planet. That's amazing. Blessed also added another comment saying to educate people about the dangers of climate change and how to reduce it. And I think that's a very important one, especially when we talk about school. I don't feel like there's enough discussions around this in school. I know that we do touch it a little bit in my geography and a little bit in the history section, but it's not enough at this point, I feel. And that's just my opinion. And then more comments: continue advocating for climate-friendly solutions, like sustainable energy. Oh, there we go. Brendan has popped in the comments. Be more critical of following planet destructive trends. Sorry, my screen just glitched for a second. Inconsistently science, that is the wrong word. Following traditions that is not friendly to our environment, and instead helping a local or national climate action group as an opportunity to take collective action and advocate for policies that support sustainability. Okay, that's amazing so far. Okay. And then I think this is just a note to everyone. There is a march to Parliament on Wednesday from the Desmond Tutu, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation. And then I also see that the data reimbursement form has been, or the link to the form has been posted in the chats as well. So if you need to be reimbursed for the data that you've used for the session, please complete this form. And there is a limited amount of data that we can reimburse. So please make sure that you fill in this form and we will try our best to reimburse you. Margaret has said, climate change begins with me. I need to implement what I learned from the meeting, put it into action. And that is amazing. Just admit someone here. Yes, Sammy has also said, climate change should be a subject in our schools to prepare the future generation and also ensure that they won't repeat the same have done, which has brought us to where we are. And that is very, very true.
Really, really incredible. I'm also really noting time. And I think this has been really amazing. And you guys have been extremely engaging, which is amazing. And I just wanted to kind of put a reminder in the chat as well, and like speak to the kind of work that we do. So our work, and this is collectively, our work needs for us to actively work toward dismantling harmful practices, to constantly put in work to decolonize the spaces we exist in, and work toward transitioning to a just and sustainable future. And this is absolutely important to keep in mind. The time has come, though, that I dislike the most, and it's the time where we sadly have to say goodbye. And this time hurts my soul because I just feel like we could do so much more together. But it is all right. I just really do want to say thank you to everyone who has joined today, and thank you for the engagement, and thank you so much for the knowledge sharing that's been going on. We really do appreciate all of that. I do really just want to reiterate that our email is in the chat. We put it in if you'd like to get in touch with us, team@africanclimatealliance.org, or africanclimatealliance.org on our website. I've also put a registration link for Wednesday's workshop. So please do register so that we can see you then. And then we're also on social media. And that's one of the ways that you can keep, what is the word? The word has left me, updated on our activities at the African Climate Alliance. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Normally we would do a check out just maybe speak about one thing that we've learned. And so maybe that's what we'll do. Because we are 10 minutes over time. And I also see people just going like, I cannot wait to see you guys on Wednesday. And at the march as well. And, really awesome stuff. Just fireworks, explosions happening in the chat, which is great. So I think now is the time. Again, thank you so much for joining us. On Wednesday, we will be having a more discussion form of engagement. Less like we did here, where we had some information to give to the group. We are going to be in conversation with someone else or some people else that we're going to invite. And then they're going to be speaking to us about their experiences, specifically touching on this idea of community action and how that can sort of drive the sustainable development and support circular economy. So I'm super, super excited, and I hope that you also tune in. Tasneem, also just one last thing before I hand over to Tasneem, just to like close this off and say goodbye to us. Wanting to note that we are taking the chat, so we're going to keep the chat. So if you have a question that you put in that we were not able to get to before the workshop ended, we will be in touch. So if you can please just maybe put your name, your email to your question, maybe email us with your question, and we will definitely respond. Tasneem, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Michelle. I think just the sentiment to what Michelle has said, this has been an awesome session. You guys are amazing. And we hope that this is not the last time we will see you, and that you will be joining us, not just on Wednesday, but for the future sessions that we will have. Again, from my side, thank you so much for joining the session, and also just making this space a comfortable one for everyone involved. So yeah, I think unfortunately time is constraining us. So we will definitely get in touch, especially with those reimbursements. But unfortunately, if you don't fill in the form, we won't be able to reimburse you. So please fill in the forms. Michelle, I don't know if you want to touch on the question that was popped up in the chat before we leave.
I think we'll follow up via mail.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Brendan, we will respond to you personally. Okay, and then we look forward to seeing some of you on Wednesday. Hopefully all of you will be able to join us. But again, thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening further.